Welcome to Futurartist Records Presents. Rhythm plays an important role in all genres of music. It can help define style and cultural origin. Joining me today is a percussionist to talk about a style that differs from what we normally hear. Futurartist Records presents Stephen Bross. Stephen, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You brought some stuff for us to look at and hear.
Yeah.
This is going to be cool.
My babies.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit before the show about you've been all over the world. You've done lots of different studies and played all sorts of different kinds of music. When did you start drumming? How did you start doing that, and how long have you been playing?
Well, I started when I was 5, and I actually got turned on to it when my parents took me to a parade. And this high school band was coming by, and I was just blown over by just the intense brass. And when the drum line passed me, and I could feel that in my chest and in my gut, I just like, every cell in my body said, I want to do that.
Cool.
And my father set me up with drum lessons with a music major at Lehigh University where he was teaching English. And I started playing snare drum and then started getting into drum set and Western classical percussion. Cool. And then when I was in high school, I went to a classical music camp called Kinhaven Music School. And that just opened me to the world of Western classical music and playing in community. And after high school, I spent a year as an exchange student in India on the Rotary Club.
Cool.
And that blew my mind open and stretched my boundaries culturally and musically, and opened me to the amazing world of these drums. And when I came back and went to college, I took a year off and toured the East Coast with a reggae band.
Oh, wow.
And that was awesome, good fun, and taught me the beauty and the joy of the groove.
Yeah.
And after graduate school, I met a guru and got involved in a Hindu-based path and learned all about kirtan, which is devotional chanting in the Hindu tradition.
Okay.
And I had an opportunity to play these drums again, and I've been playing kirtan and now fusion and rock and jazz on these drums ever since. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. What have been some of the formative moments on this path? You mentioned a lot of styles there. You mentioned doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'd say the first formative moment in my life was Kinhaven Music School that I went to for 3 summers when I was in high school.
Okay.
Because it was an unusual music camp in that it wasn't one of these cutthroat competitive places, but it was really all about cooperation and bringing out the best in each other, and in a musical context.
Okay.
So I got exposed to all kinds of Western classical and contemporary art, percussion music, which was really mind-expanding.
Yeah.
In that beautiful southern Vermont space really made a big impression on me.
Sure. Yeah.
And it also kind of planted the seeds of the 3 main themes that have run through my whole life, which is my passion for music, for community, and for spirituality.
Cool.
And the next piece I would say that really influenced me was the year I spent in India. And I had spent a summer in France the year before, and I thought, wow, that was awesome. I'd really love to experience something way out of the box.
Right.
And India was that.
Right,
It's like
for
another
sure.
planet, culturally and musically.
Yeah.
So I got to discover just how deep this Indian music tradition goes.
Yeah.
And then when I came back to the States, when I was in college, playing in the reggae band actually had a big impact on me. It was awesome fun, it was challenging, but I got to experience just how powerful music can be to bring people together.
Yes.
And to create a sense of unity. And I think almost anyone who's been to a big concert or who plays in a group has had that experience where something clicks and you're in a space of unity with the whole group. And I thought, wow, even in a bar at 2 in the morning in Miami Beach, like there's a sense of the sacred shows up. And so that really impacted me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we talked about that quite a bit before the show, how it doesn't matter what genre it is, when everybody's there for the same purpose, it can really create something you don't experience anywhere else.
Yeah, it's totally magical.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about India. Why don't you go into a little bit more depth on your experience there and how it's affected your music, especially because you studied all these other things, and then when you went there, it just kind of swirled everything around and changed it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, when I went to India, I was with a host family, and they had a friend who came by the house and asked me, what do you want to do when you're in India? And I was like so busy getting used to a whole different world that I hadn't thought about it. And I said, wow, well, I think I'd really like to learn to play the tabla, because I'd heard tabla in the Beatles music with George Harrison.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I'd really like to learn those drums. And didn't think too much of it, but a couple weeks later he came by and said, I have tabla lessons set up for you at my house.
Wow.
And I was blown away, but that meant I had to bike an hour across town and an hour back to take these lessons.
See how serious you were.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a bit of a test. But I fell in love with them, and it took me like a month just to get sound out of these drums, because they're not like other drums. It takes a specific technique to actually get good sound. So that was quite a beautiful dive into Indian music. And also, in the Indian music in India is very different from here, because their classical concerts are usually all night long. So they'll start at 9 in the evening and they'll go till 8, 9, or 10 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
And what's also amazing is that people of all walks of life can be there. Their tickets are usually very affordable. And so you have people who are the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich in this space for like 10, 12 hours, just sinking into this music. And it was really eye-opening and mind-opening to see how powerful that was to actually unify the culture. That people had this appreciation of something very sophisticated.
Yeah. And you mentioned how the culture is very, very different in India. What exactly is the tabla? And how is it different from the Western approach to drumming?
Yeah, well, it is I would say it's probably the most complex and sophisticated drumming tradition on the planet.
Wow.
It has a much wider range of rhythmic cycles. In the West, we mostly play in cycles of 3 or 4 beats, or 6, 8, sometimes 5, 7, maybe 9.
Right.
You know, if you're Frank Zappa.
Right.
But in India, they have rhythmic cycles that range from 8 beats all the way up to 21 and higher.
Wow.
But their most common rhythmic cycle is 16 beats, and the mathematics that get involved with polyrhythms and playing different rhythmic structures over like a 16-beat pattern. They'll play maybe a 7-beat cycle over 16 beats and then come around to the downbeat many cycles later. So the games of polyrhythms and mathematical divisions gets mind-stretching.
Yes, I'm sure. You don't see that very often in Western music, where they'll do those types of challenging things. How did that affect when you heard those things? How did that affect everything you had learned prior to that?
Well, it was like a whole new instrument, really. Yeah. Well, it had to do with learning a very strict structure and playing within that. The Indian music is all improvised, and so it's a lot like jazz. And jazz has very strict structures about how you can play and what you can't play.
Right.
And in this tradition, they're even stricter. So it's quite an undertaking to learn the structures and then to be creative inside those structures.
Right.
Is a whole new ball game. So I immediately gained a lot of respect for it, and I haven't developed myself as a classical percussionist. That's in the Indian tradition. That's like a life undertaking of its own.
Wow.
So I've mostly been focusing on the folk tradition and the devotional chanting, but I have great love and respect for the classical tradition.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Would you give us an example of how this works? How it's played? We talked about tones and vocal notes, some of those types of things. Kind of give our audience an overview of what these are and what they do.
Sure. Well, in the Indian percussion tradition, it's not a written tradition like in the West. We write down our notes.
Yeah.
Whereas there, each note has a word. They're called bowls.
Okay.
And so they can recite compositions and then play them. And in fact, often students will learn how to recite the tabla for a year or years before they even touch the drums.
Interesting.
And they have different bowls like na, tun, te, kat, ge, da. And so they can recite like a composition like kat gadagi din na, gadagi din na gina dakita. So to hear a tabla player recite is almost as impressive as hearing them play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Bross.
So this is the tabla. They're drums from North India. And this drum on your left is the dayan. And it's made of rosewood and buffalo hide straps and goatskin head. And this black dot in the center is called the gob. It's made of like iron filings and manganese and some strange secret recipe. I think there's cow spit in there maybe. This lower drum is called the bayan. It's made of copper, nickel-plated copper. It's also goatskin. This tradition is largely vocal. So there's words for each of the sounds that the drums make that are called bowls, and they only mean this sound. So like some of the examples are, there's na, tun, te, de, trakka, tidekitte, ge, da, din, nuk, chup. So there's quite a range of tones you can get out of just these two drums. And you can put those sounds together in a composition, such as you could play dagena tinakadinna, dagena tinakadinna, dagena tinakadinna, dagena tinakadinna, dagena tinakadinna da. Now within Indian drumming, there's a whole range of different rhythmic cycles that we play in, ranging anywhere from 6 or 8 beats all the way up to 21 beats. But the most popular cycle in the classical tradition is a 16-beat cycle called tintal. And that consists of a format that's very much like the Mozart sonata form, which is A-A-B-A. And that sounds like da din din da da din din da. That's A and A. And B is da tin tin ta, and then another A, da din din da. So together it sounds like da din din da da din din da da tin tin ta da. So in the rhythmic tradition, it's all about coming back to that first downbeat. And there's lots of interesting mathematical divisions and separations that happen that I'll tell you about. But first, I'll show you a little exercise that's called a kaida that will take a theme like datita and explore that. In the same way, in an etude, you get good at playing riffs. Since all Indian music is improvised, it gives you lots of vocabulary to play with while you're playing spontaneously. So there's a composition called datita that sounds like this, that's played over a 16-beat cycle. Datita 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 dagiti nakina tatita 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 dagiti nagina datita 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 dagiti nakina tatita 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 dagiti nagina. So that was a small composition, and that last group of 3 phrases that I played is called a tihai, which is a common rhythmic structure in tabla playing, which can range from a very short group of 3 up to really long divisions that can last over many cycles of 16 beats. So a very short example, like in 8 beats, and tabla players count beats on their digits of their fingers because we conveniently have 6 points on our fingers. So 8 beats would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Takita da, takita da, takita da. And in 16 beats, like that last phrase that I played, there's a phrase that goes datita datita da datita da geti nakina da, which is 9 beats. And if you put a 2-beat space in between each of those 3 sections, you get exactly 32 beats. So the way that sounds is datita datita da datita da geti nakina da, dinna datita datita da datita da geti nakina da, dinna datita datita da datita da geti nakina da. And that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Stephen Bross playing the tabla. Thanks, Stephen. That was amazing. That music is so complicated, so interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool stuff. So we talked about the Indian tradition. You gave us some examples of how that works. How has that changed the way you do music since you've come back to Boulder?
Well, I would say it's such a sophisticated and rich tradition that it gave me just a very wide palette of approaches and strategies and ways of looking at rhythmic structures that are a heck of a lot of fun to play and lend themselves really well to a whole range of world music, Middle Eastern, Jewish, Celtic, fusion, rock, jazz. So I've really enjoyed bringing those two together. One of my great inspirations is a tabla player named Zakir Hussain, who some people have heard of, one of the greatest tabla players, and he does a lot of fusion music, and so I listen a lot to him, and he's very playful and humorous and just a phenomenal player. So.
Cool. How you mentioned Celtic music.
Yes.
And we talked prior to the show, about all these different aspects that have come in. How did Celtic music, having done this, how did it show up in your life?
Well, in recent years, actually, I've encountered some friends who play a lot of Celtic and Irish music.
Okay.
One is Stefan Walliger, who's from California, and he does a really interesting mix of Irish and Hindu and old Christian music.
Oh, interesting.
And so a lot of call and response chanting.
Okay.
But that's been a wonderful opportunity because he mixes Irish storytelling with the music. So it connected me not only with those beautiful, beautiful old melodies, but that storytelling. And it was a real eye-opener for myself because in our culture, I think, often white men can think we don't have a culture or a heritage.
Right.
But he helped me tap into my white Anglo-Saxon white male heritage.
Yeah.
So just going deeply into that Irish background, it was really enriching for me.
Cool. Very cool. You've gone in a lot of different directions. What's your next direction? What next project do you have that you're working on?
Well, I'm looking at expanding, doing more drumming circles.
Okay.
Actually, I've done some of those recently, and I just find they're so powerful at bringing people together and helping them be in touch with their creativity and with each other, and that beauty can come out of nothing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And another is I'm really wanting to bring together my Christian heritage, my love of Christian music, Gregorian chant, and merge that with my Indian devotional music. So I have a number of musicians in the area that we're working on putting something together.
That's very cool.
That's really about heart-centered playing.
Yeah. And just really quickly, you talked about kirtan and then you mentioned Gregorian chant. How can those be related? How can they tie together?
They tie together beautifully well because Gregorian chant is all modal, and those early modes actually came from Spain. When the Moors were in Spain, it's Persian in its origin.
Yeah.
But when you listen to Gregorian chant, you can hear there's like a minor quality or a quality of the intervals in those chants are really kind of haunting.
Yes.
And there's something about them that's not like major minor.
Right.
And what you're hearing is actually the deep origins of Persian music there. And so, interestingly, Indian music has its origins in Persian music also.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So there's a common thread there.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
This was a lot of fun. Learned a ton of stuff today. And it's always cool to hear how other cultures approach their music.
Yeah.
So that was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, thanks for watching this show. Make sure that you stick around during the credits. We're going to be playing some music that Stephen performed at the Rialto. We'll also have his web information up and his Facebook information up so you can look at some of the other things he's done. And as always, like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought about this show. Support the show. Support artists like Stephen. This is amazing stuff. And, show your support for all the things that we're doing here. I'm Michael Hartsock. Thanks for watching Futurartist Records Presents.